Welcome to How to Share, a podcast about teaching, learning, giving, and growing. I'm Wynne Leon, and in this episode, I'm with professor, counselor, and author Vicki Atkinson, and we are talking about how to share feedback. Vicki tells us about her project in the works, a novel that builds on her fascinating and intriguing family history. Vicki has done the hard work to not only write, but also to seek out and incorporate feedback. She tells us what she learned from her doctoral dissertation about separating the ego from the work and how that's an essential part of being able to really take in someone else's input. We talk about asking the right questions when someone solicits our feedback and also being specific when we want input. And Vicki shows us what having a growth mindset looks like when it comes to incorporating comments. Vicki walks us through the discernment necessary to pick out what is helpful when it comes to feedback and gives us permission to disregard what doesn't fit. This is a great conversation about a tricky subject, and Dr. Vicki Atkinson's wisdom shines brightly through. I know you'll love it. Hi, Vicki.
Hi, Wynne. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad to have you on to talk about how to share feedback, because you've seen this from all sides, like as a student, as a professor, and now as a writer.
Yes.
And that's just like, that's a 360 view. But so I want to talk about that, but I also want to start with a sneak peek into the project that you have scheduled to publish early next year. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I haven't given away the title yet. I'm kind
Yeah.
of holding that back a little bit, but there is some early work going on with cover design and, what I've shared with people, thank you for asking, is it's a novel, but the inspiration really comes for anyone who's read Surviving Sue. The inspiration really comes from a lot of, that beautiful what if thinking. And the questions that I got from readers of Surviving Sue about whether or not I had done a drill down about my mom's family and my mom's really intense capacity for intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And I write in Surviving Sue that there were times that I could pick up on my mom and her sister's unspokens.
Mm-hmm.
They had sometimes full on, often very naughty conversations. And you could just, whether it was body language
Mm-hmm.
or just intuitiveness, I could, piece together exactly what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the clarity, about writing for wellness that came as a result of really looking at that was understanding that my mom often perceived me as a threat,
Mm-hmm.
because of that I could kind of tune in. And so I've written a novel. You've been very gracious to be one of my beautiful beta readers, about a family that has kept a lot of secrets, the
Mm-hmm.
parents from the mothers, especially from their children, and kind of the explosiveness and what
Mm-hmm.
happens. But along the way, while I dug in, I found some ancestry stuff that answered actually some real questions that I had about my mom that I was not expecting at all.
Amazing. I mean, it's just so amazing. You've set that up so well. Just that family ability to do unspokens, and then how you tease that into a story. I mean, I would love that. And the basis in history. It reminds me of our
Yeah.
recent podcast that we did with Allison Richmond, who took the Harry Elkins Widener story. I mean,
Yeah.
you've done so much of that same thing, which has had the basis in
Yeah.
a grounded story and then come up with a great narrative around it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in the course of that, you signed up for a writers group where you've been sharing your novel by reading out loud. That's so courageous. And I think
Mhm.
that's where you receive the feedback. I love sharing my thoughts with you because you see the separation from your work and yourself, something many writers never figure out. Words on the page might be extensions of ourselves, but they don't define us.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
an incredible piece of feedback to
Yeah.
receive.
Yeah.
Feedback about feedback.
Yeah, it is. And I'd written a blog post about that back in July when I was still, just a newer member a few months in.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've written a textbook, I wrote a dissertation, I wrote a memoir. I'm, finalizing a novel, but I think when you put yourself out there and you give people copies of your work, and we've learned from other authors that there is a lot of power in the process of actually reading your work aloud,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's just to yourself or, reading it for a small audience or family members.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get feedback from other people that you have an openness to receiving, that's a lovely thing because I've learned and watched over the years in a lot of different contexts that finding a way to separate yourself from the creation is is really an important
Mm-hmm.
self-care technique because if you see too much intertwining,
Mm-hmm.
those two things, then your ego gets engaged, you feel bruised, wounded, and it halts or complicates the process of
Mm-hmm.
creating.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but I
Yeah.
think, it was interesting to receive that feedback, but another member of that group said, it's because you did a dissertation. You had your butt chewed, up one
Right.
side and down the
A
other. And I was like,
little bit of it.
were you there?
Well, and I love
Um,
that you brought that back to that that learning mindset because I was looking through some work by Carol Dweck, the
yeah,
professor that talks about the growth mindset, and
right.
she talks about those two different mindsets, and she describes the fixed mindset as believing that qualities are carved in stone.
Yeah.
The fixed mindset, it creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then in contrast, she says the growth mindset is based on the belief that your basic qualities are things you can cultivate through your
Mm-hmm.
efforts, your
Mm-hmm.
strategies, and help from others. Although people may differ in every which way, like their talents and their aptitudes, interests, or temperaments,
Yeah.
everyone can change and grow through application and
Yeah.
experience. And it's just even that basic underlying belief, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where that you can change, even cultivating that, I bet, in your students and in yourself as you, whether it's the dissertation process or now.
Yeah, and I think I mean, just in general, whether it's about, something you've written or created, I think it's always good if you ever find yourself in a position where someone's asking for a critique or they're asking for feedback. I learned the hard way that the most important thing to do is to answer the question with a question, which is, tell me how I can be helpful to you, because
Mm-hmm.
that's such a broad,
Mm-hmm.
kind of open door to walk through. And if someone is really looking for, I want feedback about the concept, that's one
Mm-hmm.
thing. If I'm looking for errors of omission, do you want me to do a deep dive line edits,
Mm-hmm.
about things? But I think, taking that pause for a minute to just ask what people are looking for is really important because I have seen that mismatch,
Mm-hmm.
where people
Mm-hmm.
just didn't say it, and
Right.
the two parties are not aligned, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden there are hurt feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also when I've been asked to provide feedback, trying to take myself out of my ego out of the thing too, and just, be that curious reader,
Yeah.
that curious observer of, oh my gosh, this is where I'm confused. Maybe I can just point that out as opposed to this is what irks me, which
Yes.
is personal, and I try to go a little bit more global when I give
Hmm.
feedback, if that makes any sense.
It does. And I think, it's also important for people to consider. So if we think about it just in the writing context, it
Mm-hmm.
makes sense to kind of stay in your lane a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and you wrote a beautiful memoir and,
Mm-hmm.
you were generous about reading Surviving Sue. It's important to connect with people who have an interest in the same type of work,
Right.
that you do. And I saw something, I
Yeah.
won't say where,
Yeah.
play out recently, between two writers where, their genres could not have been more different. One is very like literary fiction and
Mhm.
expansive and rich and, descriptive.
Yeah.
And the other person, really wants to be like a thriller writer. And when those two people were giving each other
Yeah.
feedback, I trying to think of an alternative word to hostile.
Yeah.
Can't come up with one,
Yeah.
right?
That's such a good point because,
Mm,
taking it into account who it is that's giving you feedback. One of my favorite quotes is from Morgan Freeman, and he said, some of the best advice I've been given is don't take criticism from people who you wouldn't go to for advice.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
that's a,
yeah. And I think sometimes people that are so hungry for feedback, especially early on in the creative process, that they're on the right track.
mhm.
I've seen, students, fellow writers, creative types ask for feedback too soon. So I think that's
Mm.
another thing that I think is, just really important.
Say
Sometimes you
more
need to
about
make
that.
sure,
Just
yeah,
let it bake a little more.
yeah, have confidence, right?
Hmm.
Let some things come together before you offer it up to someone else, for
Hmm.
insight and input. Unless you say specifically, I'm at a crossroads, I've taken this far
Hmm.
and I'm stuck. That's a different thing.
Hmm.
But I think sometimes people ask for feedback too soon when what they're
Hmm.
really looking for is I want encouragement,
Hmm.
right? And so again, it's important to really,
Hmm.
think about what the ask is,
Hmm.
and I think one of the comments that I got from one of the members of the writing group was about sharing thoughts with me because they saw that I could see the separation between the work
Hmm.
and myself.
Hmm.
And this person actually wrote on, the portion of, my novel that I read that day. Something many writers never figure out. Words on the page might be extensions of ourselves, but they don't define us, that
Hmm.
piece.
Hmm.
I think it's really hard because there's a fragility
Hmm.
about creating.
Hmm.
So I see people get a lot of like, unnecessary wounds sometimes, and then they stop the process. And so we
Hmm.
hear that a lot from people that pick up the
Right.
novel, put it away, start it and stop it. It's hard.
It is hard. It is so hard.
Yeah.
I love that advice not to do it too early in your ideation process. To have
Yeah.
a so that you can have a little more um belief structure,
Yes. Even if it's
foundation.
wrong.
Right.
Yeah, even if it's wrong. And in
Yeah.
that same blog post, maybe you were going to mention this too,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a writer with the Chicago Writers Association, that I really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very cheeky, B.A. Durham. And one of the things that I loved in a piece that he had written back in the summer,
Mm-hmm.
if you do that and you get feedback and you're like, oh, really kind of like wound up about it, he's just so like blunt. He said, if there's an issue, it's just a matter of fixing it. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
Just treat it like a missing loose screw on a bookshelf. Fix the problem, and you might just create something great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you're like all over the place and the reader doesn't know it is a bookshelf,
Right.
right? Can't conceive of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's hard.
It is. He also went on to say, which I love, remember that you're in charge. After getting feedback, read it and go take a walk. I feel that physical distance from my computer gives me the emotional distance as well. I do this even when I get good feedback because not all positive feedback is correct, even when it feels good.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And so you have to take that into account too.
Mhm.
There is sometimes a power dynamic in giving and receiving feedback. And some people like to, it's a little sexist sounding, but you'll understand what I mean, to blow like happy breezes up one skirt, right? I'm
Mhm.
gonna like, tell you things just
Right.
because I want you to feel good, but that it doesn't really help when that
Mhm.
happens. And yeah, I think that's
Right.
very true. And I think the other thing that I think is important about that is I yeah, trying to choose my words carefully here. I think you can get stuck then feeling like if you don't get positive feedback, that
Mm-hmm.
all hope is lost.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's an appetite for it when you're feeling insecure about what you're creating.
Yep.
And when you get that, and it's a one-time only thing, I love Durham's advice. You need to just be practical about it
Mm-hmm.
and, get her done and just fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Or the other, I think, important point is that you can hear it, you can
Mm-hmm.
receive it. You don't have to integrate it. You
Mm-hmm.
can push it
Right.
back.
Yeah.
And you don't have to tell the person that. You can just
Right.
go, thank you very kindly,
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks
and
for
let
your
it go.
opinion. Right. And
Hmm.
and it might conflict with other things you've heard. I mean, I think that's where you have to be
Yeah.
using your intuition to filter that as well, right?
Ooh, look what
Mm-hmm.
you did right there. Yeah.
Mm, aha, yep,
Ooh,
yep.
yeah.
Do you have a time of day when giving or receiving feedback works best for you?
Hmm. Giving or receiving. You and I are the same. I think
Yeah.
about this very often. Given a choice, I like doing the hard things in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
if I can, to have that quiet time to get a little centered, whatever my
Mm-hmm.
practice is that day. Um,
Right.
because especially if I'm giving feedback, and in the
Mm-hmm.
roles that I've had, I give people feedback about all kinds of things, their
Mm-hmm.
life, digitally or
Right.
on a piece of paper in the form of a resume or a vita, giving people feedback about things they've written, in a consulting role, cover letters, the job market
Mm-hmm.
is very difficult right now. And so I think people that have been otherwise confident in their careers about how
Mm-hmm.
to express and, promote themselves are sometimes a little stymied. So if it's if the stakes are high and I know it really matters, I want to do those things for other people
Mm-hmm.
right away in the morning
Yeah.
when I'm the freshest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
I
the
know
other
that even
part,
in parenting, like the thing I try not to talk in the evenings because
yeah,
my I'm clouded.
yeah,
I'm tired, and so it just
yeah,
whatever is I'm going to say, even if it is what I mean to say, it
yeah,
just comes out a little murkier.
yeah,
It's better in the
yeah.
morning.
And I think it's because some of us are gatherers during the day. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, because I know you, I know that
Mm-hmm.
you are this way too. And there's a lot in our lives that we can't resolve as we move through the day,
Mm-hmm.
every day, right? Where we have no agency, no opportunity to have influence, and yet we're confronted by things that we wish we could fix or solve or
Mm-hmm.
be more impactful about. And they're large, they're small, they're in between. But I think sometimes later in the day, I may not always be aware of it, but I'm still carrying these things with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can be less open, a little edgier, definitely fatigued, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I simply run out of words.
Mm-hmm.
There are none left. There are
Yes,
just none left.
I hear you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
but
thank goodness from you. That doesn't happen very often.
oh, yeah, but I mean, when you're giving feedback, you want to use the right words. If it's
Mm-hmm.
oral feedback and it's a Zoom meeting like this, I am very, and you've seen me, we've talked about this. I am I'm always very concerned about body language, eye contact,
Mm-hmm.
positives, as much as possible conveying with you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you, even if I have to give feedback that may not be embraced
Yeah.
initially or is corrective in some way.
Right.
But it is very difficult,
Mm-hmm.
to do that if you're just doing track changes in a document and you
Mm-hmm.
don't get a chance to talk about it with
Mm-hmm.
someone. It's very challenging. You and I also share something in common about getting up really early.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, because there are a couple of folks I'm helping with some job search things, I've been getting up like 3:30 or 4. So that's just kind of how extreme it can be at certain times, so that I know I can do what I need to do and get at it right away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, before the clouds start to gather in my head. I can't do that for
Right.
like day upon day upon day,
Mm-hmm.
but when it's necessary, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you on that.
yeah.
So I'm wondering two things.
Mhm.
Can you tell us when we're going to see your book in print? And any last things to say about feedback and giving or receiving?
I think, well, I'm turning in hopefully the final draft before the holidays, and like March, April is the
Mm,
target date. I'm having some, fun kind of putting the finishing touches on so soon. And I'm grateful to people who've been so supportive along the way, as I've
mm,
talked about, often blogging about,
mhm.
the process, because I've never written a novel, and I feel like my brain has expanded so much.
Yeah,
It
it's
is of
brave.
all the things.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it is truly professionally and creatively the hardest thing I
Mhm,
have ever done.
mhm.
And yet I would do it all over again,
Yeah,
even going back, 2.5 years when it was just a spark of an idea.
yeah. Has the
So
has
soon.
the feedback made it easier or harder?
Um, I think the feedback early on was enthralling because I had a beta reader, my dear friend Kathleen and my dear friend Linda and you, um, reading a chapter at a time, but especially my friend Kathleen, who was like, "Whoa, go, 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 go. I want more." And even now she's, finished reading the whole thing, and um, she's like, "Okay, are you done with that yet? Because I want to know what happens to the characters next," which is such a beautiful thing. So that's very enthralling. But I think then there is the sticky stuff, where you learn about some of your writing crutches. And
Mm-hmm.
I now feel like I know what they are. And I'm learning from a dear friend who's a screenwriter, who has completely changed my vision about how to write a scene. And I would love to go back and overhaul some of what I've done,
Mm,
with that perspective, but it'll
okay.
need to be the next thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it has been wonderful. It has been challenging. I'm so grateful to you because gosh, you've read it like 2.5 times? Oh my gosh. 2.5 times, right? Yeah, but it is you give birth to something, and I
Mm-hmm.
think because of the family connection, that idea of, writing for family, writing for posterity, it is something that even though it's a novel, it tells a
Mm-hmm.
story, I think, about my mom's family, and I know for sure this ancestral finding, I would never have
Mm-hmm.
dug, you
Yeah.
know, to get that
Right.
information. So,
What a
yeah,
gift.
yeah, but along the way, I have like great, empathy and regard for people on both sides, the getting, the receiving feedback. And I guess just to kind of wrap this up, I think people need to be very thoughtful about what they're asking for
Mm-hmm.
when they request feedback, not just beta readers, but just in
Right.
life generally. And I think if you're asked to be in a role like that, it's really good to define the parameters,
Mm-hmm.
just to make sure that
Right.
you're hitting the target as best you can.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And to make sure that your um, cloudiness doesn't impact
Yeah.
your words that you're
Yeah.
providing,
And
your
some
feedback
things
you're
you can
providing.
just say, yes. And some things you can just say, thank you very much. But your input has had no impact on me whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think you have to, from a values point of view, you need to look at some of what may come your way and just go, no, no, and
Yeah.
have confidence about it because it's yours.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate so much your time talking about this and giving us the sneak peek into your next project.
Thank you, Wynne.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Our music was written for us by the incredible duo of Jack Campora and Rob Koenig. For show notes and more great inspiration, see avitiva.com, avitiva.com.